The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of KSMQ Public Service Media Incorporated or its assigns.
Welcome to Garden Connections. I'm your host, Stephanie Passingham. Well, we've got a great show for you today. I hope you'll stay with us. We're going to be visiting with Paul Trischka. He's a master gardener, and for those of you who remember from last season, he came out and diagnosed some of the issues in our community garden plot. We'll also be paying a visit to Michelle Keller, and she has a hydroponic garden up near Faribault. And of course, we'll get a great recipe from Chef Stephen Larson. I hope you'll stay with us for Garden Connections. Well, we are so pleased to have Paul Trischka, Master Gardener, back with us on the program. Paul, thanks so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you very much for having me here today. I welcome the chance to be back here at KSMQ TV and talk to the listeners here in southern Minnesota and northern Iowa. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Well, Master Gardeners provide a great service to gardeners all over our region, and today you are going to tell us about how to become our own plant doctor. So I'm really excited to hear kind of the structure, the framework that you have in mind to help people diagnose some of the problems in their garden.
Right. Thank you. You know, where I work, people bring me plants all the time. I get plants like this. They bring to me and they say, geez, Paul, what's wrong with this? Why is it all white? Or another one is, my maple plant has all these spots on there. What can I do about this? You know, what's going on? Is it going to die? What should I do? So
Right.
One of the things that I do in my role at where I work is diagnose things, you know, figure out what is going on. And one of the first things to take a look at is anytime you have a plant is to look at the weather. The weather is going to be a big factor. Number one, this year we've had people saying, why are my plants blooming so much later? Why is everything so much delayed? Well, if you remember, we had a lot of rain this year, a lot of cloudy days. That'll slow things down. The other things that we see is when we start looking at is the plant, as far as the soil that goes on within the plant, you know, there's things like the soil structure. The structure is if there was some compaction going on into that field or onto that building site or around your home. The other thing would be looking at the soil chemistry, doing a soil test, you know, pulling up getting a sample to determine what is going on from a nutrition side in that plant. And the other thing is looking at the soil biology. And the soil biology, you know, that is really interesting. And one of my...
Tons of things going on underground that we just don't even know about.
Tons of things going on there. I mean, it's just such an active little world that we don't even realize.
That's true.
But one of the things about the soil that is so important, it's whether you're into growing gardens, growing trees, lawns, anything, gardens, container gardens, soil is the common element that surrounds all of those, so you need to understand that.
Right.
The next thing we look at is make sure that you understand the pests that you have out there. Understand what this is. Then you can, the first thing is to correctly identify what is going on with that plant to know, how do I take a corrective action? Can I do something?
Yep, you have to know what it is. And if they're going to call a master gardener, you know, there are plenty of guides out here, some helpful ones, you know, that might help you identify, you know, the bug. And so you'd call your master gardener, you'd say, I have a grasshopper, a Japanese beetle, something crawling all over my plant. Or even if you just can describe what that bug looks like, that's another
That's a big plus.
First step.
Is it going to be a beneficial insect? Is it something that, hey, we don't really need to worry about? Or is it something
invite more of them in?
Or is it destructive?
Right.
So you need to be able to identify and learn what are some of the characteristics. And I know this can get very technical.
Yep.
So we look at that.
And the same thing applies to weeds as well. That's another indicator of what's happening in your soil. There are a lot of great books and resources, online resources for identifying what weeds are happening in your garden.
That's exactly right. And with the internet and all those things, I mean, they have made those challenge is so much easier to work with because you can, I know you talked about, you sent me a picture earlier of some foam on some plants, and well, I just typed into the web browser, foam on sage plant, and it told me what it was.
Told you exactly what
so
it was.
I mean, it's a wonderful tool.
And some tools that you can use that illustrates a perfect one is you've got a couple of cameras here. You've got your phone, and you've got a camera that you use in the field, and so you just take a picture of it and then go to some of your resources to help identify what those things are really valuable, to get a nice sharp picture of whether it's something on the leaf or it's a particular bug, if you can catch it on camera.
Right.
That's a great tool as well.
Because sometimes you get that picture and then 2 days later it's gone, so you don't know what it was. So this way you have a record of it.
Right. Okay, so we need to watch what's in the soil.
Yep.
We need to take a look at pests, whether they are bug pests or weed pests, and you need to have the right tools.
The right tools.
All right, so those are some great pieces of advice to get us started on our Plant Doctor Road. We are actually going to check out a visit to Michelle Keller's Labor Farms up near Faribault, and when we come back, Paul is actually going to diagnose some troubles that some folks have been having in their garden. Stay with us for more Garden Connections. We took a little drive today and we are up near Faribault, Minnesota, and we are visiting Labor Farms, and we're going to visit with the lettuce lady, otherwise known as Michelle Keller. Michelle, thanks so much for letting us come up to your greenhouse.
Thanks for having an interest in me.
All right, so we're going to talk about what most people would call hydroponics, but you have a very technical name for it. What is this system called?
It's called soilless controlled environment agriculture, or hydroponics to most people.
Okay. So hydroponics is really interesting. It's been around for a little while, but what got you interested in doing a project like this?
I went to the University of Wisconsin River Falls for my biology degree in plants, and during the course of my studies, this was back in the early 90s, hydroponics was not really out there yet. You saw it at universities, you saw very large structures, but the small town farmer has not yet come about, if you will. And so after college, I started attending conferences and saw that there are small farms, or small single-family farms, that can now do hydroponics in a small scale, providing to the local communities fresh produce year-round.
Year-round. That's amazing, and especially in Minnesota. That's
especially in Minnesota.
A wonderful thing to do. So give us the basics. Give us a basic primer of the system. We've got pipes and hoses and water running, and what happens? What's the basic way that the plants grow?
Well, I start everything from seed. There are two different ways of approaching growing hydroponically. I do everything from seed, and I use a product called Rockwool. And so the plants are planted by myself into each cell. Each flat holds 200 plants, and the basis of this is that it is cut. And so when it is ready to transplant and it's ready to go into the system, I just pull apart the cell, plant it into my channel, and it's ready to rock and roll for the next 3 weeks.
Okay. So you use a lot of water to get these guys to grow, because that's how you feed these plants, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
When they're this little, I see there, you talked about these channels, but when they're this little, are you watering from overhead?
Nope, we always water from underneath to attempt to keep down any pests or any diseases from the plant. A lot of times if there's moisture onto a seedling from the top, such as in your garden, you get a little bit of powdery mildew or get a little bit of mold growth. Okay. What we attempt here inside the greenhouse is minimal exposure to any diseases, so we do not have to try to fix the problems as they're growing.
Right, better to prevent it. That's always the case.
So we always water from underneath. The water comes in from underneath. There's holes in the flats.
Holes in the bottom of the flats. Okay,
and
so you just set them.
Yep, and the Rockwool has an incredible wicking ability. It is kind of like a spun cotton candy, if you will. It's very spongy. It holds a lot of water.
Oh my.
And so then it absorbs about 200 times its weight in water. And has a nice little air to water ratio to form perfect roots, like nice white roots like that.
That's great. And so this kind of acts like the structural function of soil.
Correct.
Gives the roots something to grow into.
Gives the plant an up and a down and a way to stabilize itself until it's big enough to stabilize itself in the system.
In the system. All right. Give us a sense of time frame. So you've got some of these guys that are a little bit smaller and some that are bigger. How long long does it take from start to finish when you're doing all this seeding in this rock wool? You seed it and then...
This would be a week old or an 8-day product right now in my system. And this is approximately about a 20-day old seedling, which is ready to go into the system. And then it goes into the system for approximately 3 weeks for this particular product at this time of year. In the winter time, I add another week on into the nursery section to get the plant as big as possible, because this is my real estate. This is in the channels. You want the strongest, biggest possible seedling and the minimal amount of time in the system that's taking up space.
Some different types of lettuce. You've got arugula here. Tell us about the different types of plants that you grow in your system.
Mostly it's by customer demand. Okay. Here in Minnesota, we like our leaf lettuce. We like our green romaine. Right. A lot of my customers are now starting to branch out a little bit. So we are now into the arugulas. We are now into the watercresses. We started to branch out into the bok choys and the Asian greens, the frigets, which would another word is endive.
Yep. The ones that have the lacy leaves.
Yep, in the greenhouse they're a little bit bigger than they are outside. Okay. Things tend to grow much different in a controlled environment than they are outside. We don't have the wind as hard hitting the plants, so the plants grow a lot taller. They grow a little bit more delicate, so sometimes
maybe a little more tender.
A little bit more tender, a little bit more flavorful, because I control what is going into this plant. And so if I see a plant needs more nutrition or it needs less nutrition, I can control that using my computers so that the nutrition going to the plant is what it needs at that time.
Now, you are able to grow year-round in here.
Correct.
Gardeners outside are restricted to those summer months. Summer inside a greenhouse, and we have a nice overcast day today, which is beneficial, but can get very hot.
Yes, it can.
When sunshine... When the sun's out, I would imagine your temperatures in here can really spike. Yes. How do you control that? What are some of the challenges of growing in an indoor system in the summers in Minnesota?
It is actually more challenging to grow in summer than it is in winter. Winter, I control everything. I control light, I can control temperature, I can control fertilizer, water. Summertime, I cannot control light, I cannot control temperature. Right. So one of the tools that we use in the greenhouse is that right now my greenhouse is shade clothed. That means there's a 40% white shade cloth on the outside of the greenhouse. So only 60% of the light coming in comes in. Okay. That brings down the temperature right there.
That helps. Okay.
Especially in the mid-afternoon. Right. I also use wet wall technology. So the airflow in this greenhouse is one directional, kind of like a tunnel. Okay. And so the air is forced in one end, which is my south end, forced out my north end, and it goes through a wet wall. And as the air goes through the wet wall, when we have a humidity gradient, not when we're not 100% humidity, say we had a low humidity day, the air comes through the wet wall, the humidity goes up, but the temperature drops. So say if we're at 90 degrees, but very low humidity, nice dry day, I can drop it between 10 and 15 degrees, even full sun, using that wet wall for at least the first 40 feet. Right. So one of the tricks of growing in the summertime is where to put your plants. So all the plants that are affected by heat more are on this end of the greenhouse or on the south end of the greenhouse where it's cooler. All the plants that can handle a little bit of heat without having detriment to it are on the north end, which is the warmest end of the greenhouse in the summertime.
So this is a very complex system. You have a lot of monitoring taking place here, so you know exactly what you're feeding your plants. Is there any application to the home gardener? Is this a system that they can reproduce on a small scale, or really are home gardeners pretty well locked into a soil-based system?
There is a lot of hobby systems available commercially on the market. Okay. Basically, they just take the system and make it smaller. So instead of a 12-foot channel, which is what we have in front of us, a hobby system might have a 6-foot channel or a 4-foot channel, maybe 4 channels. And so you can grow 8 heads of lettuce, and if you stage it right, you always have a head of lettuce always ready to come in. Yeah. And it has a little tub underneath for the water to go. Okay. And so they have shrunk the systems.
So if somebody falls in love with the system, they can maybe give it a try at home.
It's commercially available. All right. Many places on the internet.
Great. Well, it looks wonderful. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us and all your expertise. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Stay tuned for more Garden Connections. was a great visit to Michelle's place. She really had, I mean, it's just amazing the amount of greenery that she has
that was really
in her
great.
greenhouse.
Yep.
So let us actually take a look at diagnosing some of the plants. And you've brought a couple with today.
Right.
This is a very interesting one. You can clearly see something's going on there that doesn't look right.
Well, yeah, when you look at that, I mean, the person that brought it in, the homeowner that brought it in says, you know, look at all the white powdery material all over the leaves. And and I says, well, okay, you know, let's look at this. And I mean, I've seen this before, Stephanie. I mean, it's powdery mildew, which is a disease. It's a leaf disease. And one of the things that you're going to see is when you start looking at plants is where is it occurring on the plant?
On the plant, right.
Is it occurring on the leaves?
Yep, so it's not.
Is it on the flowers?
A little bit on the stem here.
A little bit on the stem.
Yep.
And so my question to the homeowner is, where are these plants? Now, obviously, they're peony plants. And, you know, I says, have you had this before? So some of the questions you look at or talk to the producer or to the grower
To the gardener, yep.
is about, where is this plant in your landscape? Is it getting full sunlight? Is it getting, is there air circulation around it? You know, it is a disease,
Yep.
and diseases do develop due to high moisture conditions. And like I mentioned to the individual, I says, got to remember too that how much rain did we have this year?
Right. So weather was a contributing factor here, but you want to know some of these other things in case there are other factors that will bring it back next year, even if we don't have the same kind of rain that we had this year.
And that was a concern this individual had is this going to come back next year?
Right.
And so how do we look at that?
Right. All right. So you brought in a tree branch this time.
Yes.
So what are we looking at here?
Well, this would be a sugar maple or a hard maple. And, you know, their concern is the spots that you see on the leaves. You know, you can see those individual, the brown, angular lesions that are occurring on the leaves.
Are they on the backside too?
Well, let's look. Okay, yep, they're a little bit there on the backside of the leaf.
Yep.
Now, one of the things that I indicated to the individual, I says, okay, so right away you go to your questioning mode. How old are the trees? You know, when were they planted?
Right.
All these questions. You know, are there a lot of them? Is there getting good air circulation?
Is this appearing on your other tree leaves too?
Is it appearing on
Is it species
others?
specific? Yep.
Now, the other thing too is, it's species specific to the maple. Does he have it on the ash? But if it's only on the maple, then you can start going to your web browser and you can say, you know, blemishes or disease lesions on hard maple, and it'll start narrowing down what you should be looking at.
I sent you a couple pictures.
Okay.
And one, you know, this is a good example. One was a picture of a grasshopper chewing holes
The grasshopper.
in leaves. But you know, I've seen enough grasshoppers to know that's what it was, and they were sitting all
Right.
over the plants, and you could tell. So I knew how to address that problem.
Correct.
But the other one that I sent you was an unusual one I hadn't seen before,
Right.
and it was of my sage plant, and it had these little bubbles all over, and I'm thinking bubbles seem fairly harmless.
Well,
But I sent it to you, and it's maybe not necessarily so harmless, but you were able to identify that for me, and so now I have just that little bit more knowledge when I
Okay.
go back into the garden.
it's a foam-looking substance that develops in the axil of the leaf. So you have your, and I'm just going to use this as a prop. You have your stem here, and then you have your leaf coming off, and then right in this point here, that's where an insect, it's called a spittle bug, will form. And it creates all that foam there, and it's just a protection mechanism for
Is the
that
bug inside that foam?
Yeah, if you just took like a tweezer or something, or like a Q-tip and moved all that foam out of there, you would see the bug in there. I mean, that's where they're living, and it's just a protection. It's kind of comical to see that, you know, there that
is
all
funny.
this
He's in this
foam
little bubble
there.
bath. Yeah. Now, is that plant going to hurt, or is that spittle bug going to hurt my sage?
No, the spittle bug is a piercing or sucking insect. It will pull juices out of the plant, so it actually lives off the plant juices. But typically, unless they're really bad, it's not going to hurt a plant. I mean, it's just something, it becomes more of a cosmetic thing, that it's probably not as attractive, and you probably wonder, you know, is it something I want to have there? So.
Yep. Well, Paul, you've given us some great tools here to be able to help us become plant doctors. Thank you so much for being here with us and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. Chef Stephen Larson is going to give us another great recipe, this time for asparagus.
Hi, I'm Chef Stephen Larson. Welcome to my kitchen at Quarter Quarter Restaurant in Harmony, Minnesota. Today's recipe is going to use fresh asparagus. Now, one of the things that I love doing with asparagus is eating it raw. I mean, a lot of it doesn't make it back out of the garden. But I use that as an inspiration to do a salad using raw asparagus. So, first thing that we're going to look for on asparagus, if you're buying it in the store, if you're not lucky enough to be growing it at home, is very tight heads and a nice bright green color. And you can see that in all of our spears here. The next thing we need to do, of course, is wash it, which I've already done, and then snap the tough ends off. And you can just do that by lightly holding it, and it's going to naturally snap off where it's tender. Now you can save these and make some soup out of that. That certainly works, but 4 of them is not going to make very good soup for me. So we're going to then cut these on the bias. So you can see in the bowl that I've already got cut here, on the bias just means at a real sharp angle. So we get some very thin, long strips. So we do that by holding that at an angle and going through with your chef's knife. Of course, a sharp chef's knife is always good. Okay, and then we can add that to the rest. So now we need to put some dressing on there. And this is going to be a very, very simple dressing. We're going to use some Meyer lemons, which are actually a cross between a lemon and a mandarin orange. So they have a great lemon flavor, but they still have the sweetness from the orange as well. And we're going to need a good shot of that, so about the juice of 2 of those. I'm going to use the handy squeezer here so we don't get any seeds in. All right, so now we've got our juice. And we also need a nice shot of extra virgin olive oil. So using a very delicious, rich, slightly peppery extra virgin olive oil from California. You can give that a quick toss just to get it working. And we're going to add the rest of our ingredients. A bit of salt and pepper, of course. Got to get that seasoning going. We're also going to put in some fresh thyme. Now, some beautiful fresh thyme leaves that I've picked, and we need to chop those down quite a bit finer. So we have about a tablespoon. Other fresh herbs would work very well here as well. You could use good old parsley if you wanted to. I like the pop and the flavor of thyme. Tarragon would also be a very good option. Right, then we're going to add about a half a cup of diced sweet red bell peppers. And toss that all together well. The thing you want to make sure and do is mix in the seasonings so that those are well mixed. Get those fresh herbs going in there. Another little touch of olive oil. All right, now it's best to let this sit for a little bit before you serve it, but we're going to go ahead and plate it up right now. So I'm going to use a nice clean bowl for this, of course. So we want things to look very pretty when we're serving them. Then to finish that up, we're going to use some lovely red Belgian endive spears. really make that salad shine. And to top it all off, a nice shaving of pecorino romano. Add a little luxurious flavor to it. Okay, so there we have it. Fresh asparagus salad, because there's nothing better than eating fresh from your garden.
Well, that recipe looked terrific as always. Thank you, Chef Larson. And thank you for joining us today on Garden Connections. I hope you'll join us again next time. I'm your host, Stephanie Passingham. On Garden Connections, we'd love to see photos of your garden. Or if you have questions for our garden experts, contact us by emailing garden@ksmq.org or like us on Facebook.